It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. From Fantatrax TV, this is Good Morning Tatooine!
Good morning, Tatooine indeed. Welcome to the live stream. We're back with your weekly recap of everything Star Wars, and we've got a lot of news to cover this week, so let's get straight into what we're covering. First up, we're going to be talking the news of the week. Rian Johnson has been reminiscing about The Last Jedi as he promotes his Netflix movie that's just coming out. Rogue One has been back on IMAX screens, brought in over 1 million over the past weekend. We'll be reflecting back on Rogue One. Andor, the TV series, should have been out, but it was delayed a few weeks. Probably we're all happy for that at the moment as we're digging into Lord of the Rings and House of the Dragon, but we'll be getting the latest news from Andor. Is Adria Arjona, I've said that completely wrong, has been talking about her character. Diego Luna's also been talking about what we can expect. We've got new Black Series figures coming away for Andor. We'll be checking them out. And for a change of topic, we'll be looking at the Ahsoka show as well. Dave Filoni's been talking about what that show means to him. We might be in a bit of a crisis of cash at the moment, but some people have money and they've been able to spend it on a Han Solo DL-44 blaster for just over $1 million. So we'll be talking about how we just lost out just by a few quid on that auction. And lastly, we'll be looking at Regal Robot's Tusken Raider prop replica bust, which looks quite incredible. And joining me to go over all this and more from Fantatrax.com, Mr. Mark Newbold.
Hello, Brian. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Mark. How are you? What have you been up to?
I'm fantastic. I've actually got a scoop for you. You know, you said that somebody hadn't got enough money to buy that Han Solo blaster. It was me.
It was you all along.
I bought it. Yes, it was me all along. I couldn't resist. I'm very well, thank you. It's busy as ever over on Fantatrax on the site and the podcasts and stuff. So there's loads going on. And yeah, Star Wars never stops, does it?
No, not at all. Lots of stuff in the news this week. So do you want to get straight into it?
Let's do it.
Where are we? It's been a long time since we've done this. Let's bring the news up. First up, Rian Johnson. He's been talking The Last Jedi. It's been 5 years. I think it's 5 years.
Yeah.
And the big line, I guess he said, when I was up at bat, I really swung at the ball. Don't think anyone can deny him the fact that he threw everything in the kitchen sink at it. Everyone will debate whether they loved it or not. That's always going to be the case when it's a form of entertainment. Some people will love it, some people will hate it. Your thoughts as Ryan came back into the conversation this past week?
Well, one thing I think is very cute and clever on his behalf is that obviously he's got Glass Onion, his second Knives Out film hitting Netflix, as you mentioned earlier. So for the guy who directed what is, I would say, undoubtedly the most divisive, it's probably the right word, divisive Star Wars film, splits opinion more than any other. It was quite smart to actually bring up The Last Jedi because it's got everybody's eyes back on Rian Johnson and as a consequence onto Glass Onion. So that was very smart. But yeah, like I say, 5 years. Can't believe it's 5 years for a start. It's a tricky one because whenever we posted it, other sites posted that news, that swinging the ball at the back line was kind of the takeaway line from the Empire interview. Whenever you mention Rian Johnson, it's going to get negative comments and it's going to get defensive comments. I can't honestly think of a subject. I'm sure Matt hates me because obviously Matt takes care of our socials and it probably causes him all kinds of headaches, which gives me happiness. So it's worth doing just for that alone. But it's anytime you get a topic like that really does split people. Wow, those comment sections go nuts. And for my thought process, yeah, he did give it a good go. He did throw everything at it. You could argue he overthought it to a degree. I think Star Wars sometimes is kind of almost better when it's simpler. But by the same token, we've got Andor coming up, and that's quite deep, and that works for sure. So you can take different approaches. Yeah, it's always going to be a contentious film, whatever happens in the future. Even if George does a special edition.
Yeah, definitely. If you're watching live, let us know your thoughts on The Last Jedi 5 years on. He mentioned as well the sort of the final scene, and I think that's maybe one of the elements that causes the most division. Final images of the movie, Luke Skywalker, and so on. And he's almost defending his thinking behind the scene, and he talks about the process of stripping away. Is always in this again to something essential that really matters. But I'm not sure if he delivered on that. But the fact that it was so divisive, I don't think he necessarily achieved what he set out to. The element for me that has puzzled me is he's quite a controversial or confrontational rather figure on social media, almost having a go at anyone that didn't like his content. And obviously there's people that deserve it because there's people that are incredibly rude, and there's people who are just genuinely not my cup of tea. Which is fine if you're in entertainment. You kind of have to take the good with the bad. But he always had this thing about the comments that used to irritate me were about wanting to deconstruct Star Wars and not wanting to make a Star Wars movie. And I was kind of always the opinion of, if you don't want to make a Star Wars movie, then don't. Don't enter the franchise and then try and do something that isn't Star Wars with it. And that was kind of, I'm not a fan of The Last Jedi. And that was always kind of my issue with it, was it didn't feel like someone that wanted to make a Star Wars movie.
And the weird thing is, I think, and I know we're skipping around a bit, but Tony Gilroy on Andor has come in and said he feels like his superpower is the fact that he's not really seen much Star Wars. He's not a Star Wars fan. And so he's made a story that works within the realm of Star Wars that from what I've seen so far, you could take those elements and transpose them into a cop show or a thriller or whatever, and without adjusting too much, it would still work. And that works for Andor. But I think what the difference between that and what Rian Johnson did was Rian Johnson went to the nuts and bolts of Star Wars itself and deconstructed that. So it's the same, but not the same. And it's certainly given us lots of things to think about. I do regret the fact that the way Star Wars as an entity, hello Ruth Newbold, as an entity is set up in its entirety isn't. Doesn't have the chance to delve into things as much as it should. Yeah. We don't get to exploit, air quotes, in comics and books the way we used to, even in the Dark Horse era or even in before that, So there's things that happened in Last Jedi we should have really gone deep dive into the weeds on and never really did. And I think in a way it suffered for it in the way that other shows after, like Rise of Skywalker has got Shadow of the Sith. That's not that you need a book to help a film, but that has helped that film. So and I don't think Last Jedi ever quite got that. So I do regret that to a degree.
Elliot mentioned in the chat there that he'd rather see them take risks than play overly safe, which is, I think, is a comment you hear a lot, and I kind of largely agree with that. In order to make good Star Wars, you need to make bad Star Wars, because if you're walking the nice comfy line too much and you're not making good Star Wars, you're going to have elements of Star Wars that you don't like. But I think maybe The Last Jedi went that a little bit too far, because it wasn't just a case of I don't like that. That's not my cup of tea. It really went the full hog and almost offended people, I think, in some respects.
Yeah, weirdly, yeah, it did. I mean, I see what Carl's put there, my convention buddy today, Carl. Good bits, not so good bits. Cross section of the entire Star Wars sandpit in one movie. That's a really good way of putting it, because everything is in Last Jedi. There's a bit of everything in Last Jedi. But again, Elliot's just quoted you, and it's absolutely right. You got to risk it. You got to break a few eggs, And there's some good stuff comes out of it, and some questionable stuff. It's all a matter of opinion. There's people who will literally die on the hill of that is the greatest Star Wars movie ever, and I can't say anything. I know my Star Wars film favorite will probably always be Empire, because I'm a boring old fart. But something might come out tomorrow that knocks it off the top, and I really, really hope something does. I'd love something to come along and blow me away. So I'm pleased for people who were blown away by Last Jedi and just think it's the greatest Star Wars thing ever. But like you say, Rian Johnson, I think he's a very nice guy. I've met him; he's a lovely guy, but I do think there's a little part of him, a mischievous little devil on his shoulder that likes to go and just gets a little kick out of it, whilst keeping that angelic smile. So,
in some ways, that's why he's gotten into the genre he's gotten into the Who's Done It. Because what is Who's Done It, but other than winding up the audience?
Yeah, yeah.
You think it's this person? No, it's not.
That's a good observation.
So I don't blame him. Part of me thinks that the biggest problem that the film had was there was no storyline for the sequel trilogy to guide anyone through. There was no guidance. So, and
that's not his fault, is it?
No, JJ came in and he initially, and he was like, well, I can't make a Star Wars that's not a tribute to what's come before. So that's basically what The Force Awakens became. Rian Johnson was like, well, I don't want to make a tribute film. Let's really stir the bucket. And then by the time Rise of Skywalker comes round, it's like, oh, well, JJ was like, oh, I really didn't like Last Jedi. I'm going to deconstruct everything that he did in that movie and try and find some kind of ending in the last one. And it just didn't work, and it all fell apart. So I kind of think that there's a big part of those controlling the strings kind of let Ryan down a little bit too.
Yeah, you're right. It is deconstructed. It's a case of taking the omelette and going, well, there's the white and there's the yolk and there's the bits of shell, make an egg out of it. You can't do that. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Once you've gone as far as Rian Johnson went with the thought processes that he decided he wanted to do, Rise of Skywalker was never going to be able to take the baton and take it home the way it would have liked to have done. So I think you can't blame JJ. You can't blame Ryan. It as an entity, the trilogy as an entity, and considering it was wrapping up the 9, it definitely needed more thought, more strong through line.
And the one sort of takeaway, I guess, from his comments this past week is that he's still keen to do the trilogy. He's obviously signed up to do an original trilogy, and he's still having conversations with Lucasfilm about that, and he's still keen to do it if he finds the time, which, to be fair, is a 10-year commitment, really, in terms of development, to bring that all the way through. Not necessarily be him directing it, of course. It was he signed on to write it rather than anything else. So that can the fandom cope? It's become so divisive, and he's one of that personalities that, as we kind of said, it likes to be a little bit on the wind up as well. It's
divided like it's
the
a bad
fandom
thing,
that much.
Brian.
Yeah, he's divided the fandom that much. Can he bring them back together, even if it's something that he's controlling from start to end? No. Or, is that just going to be a nightmare for those of us that report on Star Wars news, trying to find a nice, safe balance down the middle of how you report it without upsetting every single person?
It's tricky. I think the only way, and you don't want to think of anyone spoiling the copybook. And good grief, the film made $1.3 billion. It's not like it wasn't a flop. It was like top 10 movie of all time when it came out. I know it's slipped down a bit now because of other films coming out since, but nevertheless, monstrous hit, crazy coin, which is it showed business. So Lucasfilm look at that and go, wow, look at the bottom line. You didn't hear many problems on the set of Last Jedi. We know Rogue One had troubled production. We know Solo had a troubled production. We know 9 had a rush production. You know, there's things that have happened on the TV shows, but there was no real issue that I'm aware of on Last Jedi. So I would imagine Lucasfilm would look at that and go, well, he's a safe pair of hands, and he made us a lot of money. You know, and the people that love it, love it. The people that don't, well, you know, it's a big church.
I guess the problem Ryan had was Mark Hamill wasn't particularly enamoured. I guess that was maybe the...
Yeah.
But I think even Mark said himself, he was a professional. It was a case of, I want to have the conversation because I'm not happy, but in the same hand, I'm the actor and I'm going to do the role as presented to me. Mr. Naylor, we know his thoughts on The Last Jedi, no comment.
His feeling on The Last Jedi is the same as your feeling on droids, Brian. So
it is. Let's move on from The Last Jedi to a film that probably doesn't upset as many people. Elliot makes a good point. Just before we move on to The Last Jedi, Mark wasn't there, but ironically, his best performance. It's a fair point.
Yeah, very fair point. I wouldn't argue with that. Very true. Sometimes
I think real world angst filling into the actor's performance a little bit. There we go.
Method acting.
Method acting. A film that's less divisive, Rogue One. Not without its problems and faults, but one that kind of, I think, brings most elements of the fandom together. It's been re-released mostly in America, but in IMAX theaters, celebrating, or should have been celebrating the release of Andor on Disney Plus. Across 250 cinemas across America, it made $1 million over the course of a weekend, making Rogue One one of the top 10 highest grossing films released in the IMAX format, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great. I mean, seeing any Star Wars film on the big screen is a great thing. Evening, Gary. You know, it's great to see, and it's good to get that film out. What is considered within the Star Wars world, anyway, a classic, I would say. And obviously, with Andor coming, it's never been more relevant than right now. And yes, Carl, they should have brought it out in the UK because we'd have stuck $1 million in the bank, no problem, because the love for that film is crazy. Yeah, and also getting it back in the top 10. I know charts and rankings don't really matter, but, you know, it was great to see Star Wars up there, and Rogue One puts it in that top 10 IMAX all-time chart, which, again, gives me a happy little kick. And I don't know what the Andor clips or preview was. I've not seen anything yet or heard anything yet, but I'm sure it's out there. I've probably just not caught up with it this week. But I think that's a great move on Disney's behalf, and I think it's the first time they've done that to tie in with the Disney Plus project. And goodness knows there's enough shows that do lead into Disney Plus things, you know, and there's plenty coming. So it's hopefully that sets a precedent, and hopefully it's a global thing. You know, I'm pleased the Americans got it, but I wish we'd got it. It would have been definitely deserved a wider re-release. I wish we had seen it in the UK and beyond, of course, in Europe and all throughout the world. We should have got it, so it would have been great.
Potentially the success of it, even in its limited release, is something that might incentivize them further down the line if they're doing something. I'm not suggesting they bring out the Clone Wars movie to celebrate the release of Ahsoka, but, you know.
Well, yeah, that's not a bad idea, though. That's not a bad idea. I mean, and also, I just think it just engenders goodwill. It gets people talking in a positive way about Star Wars, because that film is generally well liked, and the people who aren't mad keen in it are more ambivalent than dislike. You know, it's like, I wasn't that keen. And the ones that love it are like, oh, it's top 3 Star Wars. Like it is for me. It's top 3 Star Wars for me. So, I think it's a good precedent to set. I think they should do it more often.
It's definitely with the way Star Wars has become a little bit anti-social in terms of it's on streaming platforms. So it's very much a case of I'll watch it myself on the TV later kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's not that social meeting up aspect that's kind of lost of movies. So it's good to get out there.
Yeah,
because there's
especially
nothing,
in IMAX.
There's just nothing happening movie-wise for Star Wars. It's and I always say that is when I criticise the sequel trilogy and people try to defend it. I say, look what's happened to Star Wars movies. It was, you know, the sequels ended up being so divisive that pretty much kiboshed any kind of Star Wars movie production because everybody was like, we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, and also I think Disney Plus coming along as well. I mean, you know, we know Boba Fett had gone the way of the dodo a long time ago, and it should have been Obi-Wan, but Solo didn't do the business. And then Disney Plus comes along, and me and Mark have said this on Making Tracks. You know, we've got to wonder whether or not they would have done Solo as a film if Disney Plus had been an option. feels more like a series than a film. Because there's sequential things that happen to Solo and Chewie that you could have put into a TV series quite nicely. So I think Disney Plus has had an effect on it as well, and Disney Plus's success as well has probably made them sit back at the movies and go, wow, because this needs to be the circus coming to town. Whatever happens next for Star Wars on the big screen, that's a brand new thing, not a re-release, needs to be, oh wow, this is event cinema. We've got to go. We can't not see this. It's got to be done. And unless there's a 10-year break, you're never going to get the hype that you got for Force Awakens again, like you did for Phantom Menace. It's just not going to happen because Star Wars is readily, easily available on your phone, anywhere you look on your laptop. It's here. You can access it without physical formats. It's easy to access, so it's not special in the way that it used to be special because it's easy to consume now. But they need to right. It's like you said, but from a different angle. They've got to really think about how they're going to do it next now.
Yeah, Gary's asking an interesting question here about our take on them. They're not using the volume for Andor, and there seemed to be little care for it, despite being a fundamental piece of other Star Wars Disney Plus series.
Yeah.
I think, and this is just my thought, they were building the volume in the UK. Because they didn't have one at the start of Andor shoot during the production of Andor Series 1.
Yeah.
So I think a huge part of it, not using it, is the fact that they didn't have access to one for a large chunk of the filming schedule. And it then becomes a little bit, when they became obsessive about saying practical effects, even though the same film they were talking about having so many practical effects had more CGI shots than any other Star Wars film. I kind of feel the same with Andor. Andor's not going to have the volume, but the sheer fact of the length of production shows you it has got a lot of ILM CGI effects throughout it. So it's just a tool that they've chosen not to use, probably because it wasn't available to them, more than anything. But it's not escaping from the fact that they're using other tools, I think.
Yeah, and there's a different aesthetic to Andor than there is to all the other stuff that's come out on Disney Plus. Definitely, it feels very cinematic. We had an episode of Making Tracks out last week with Rose Degnan and Hal Hickel from ILM, and Hal mentioned some of the advancements that are coming to. Oh, thank you very much. That are coming to. Within the next 5 years. What's the big thing up down the road? What's going to change visual effects? And he said AI, in the way that you can make Hamill look 30 years younger and all the obvious stuff that we already know about that's at the start of that journey towards being sort of picture perfect. But one thing he said was that we're at the point now where we don't need blue screen and green screen. The AI can literally crop out a person from any background and it knows where the edges of the person are, and so that opens up incredible possibilities. To the degree he said that we probably haven't even thought of all the possibilities of what this tech can do. So I think it's like you say that the stagecraft wasn't available when they made Andor. I'm sure they could have figured something out if they really felt like they needed it. But also I think that the blue screen stuff and that element of it has advanced and changed and tweaked. And so the toolbox just gets bigger.
Carol's asking there if it was used at all. My understanding was it wasn't used at all.
I heard it was in one shot. I
Okay.
heard there's one shot in season 1, from what I understand. And I think I know what shot it is.
Yeah. Trailers for Andor look great. Just interesting to see how the plot could skew how we view Rogue One after the 2 seasons have played out, which we're going to come to,
Yes.
Paul. So let's just crack on with the news at that point. We'll talk Diego Luna first,
Yes.
because he makes that exact point. That Andor is going to skew how you view Rogue One.
Yes.
Things were not the way you imagined. And I guess that's going to be a lot to do with his character. And really, Rogue One kicks off with a pretty dark scene where we introduce Andor himself, where he's got shooting his comrade in order to, once he's got the information out of them and makes his kind of escape. We're maybe going to see a little bit more about what makes Andor tick and how that scene maybe fits in slightly differently in our mindset than maybe we think. He's kind of a bit of a cold-blooded underground type of guy. Maybe not so much. Maybe there's a lot more emotion to him.
Yeah. Oh, blow it. Yeah, I've seen the first 4 episodes. So Phantom Tracks were lucky enough to get to see the first 4 episodes, like some of the trades have seen. And the embargo's not down, so
So be careful what you say.
Be very careful. Very, very. The snipers are on me right now. I can see the red dots. But from what I've seen, yeah, I get what he's saying about how it will make you look at Rogue One in a different way. Now, that's not to say it will completely upend what we know of Rogue One and completely change the tone, because this is very much in the wheelhouse of the tone of Rogue One, tonally, stylistically, performance-wise, and any other measure really that you can think of. And I've seen some kickbacks to that already online of people saying, "Oh, why are they making us look at things differently?" I don't think it's going to necessarily make things feel different. Certainly not from what I've seen, but it will certainly make you look at things from instead of looking at it that way, you're going to look at it that way. You know what I mean? It's just going to give you the edges, the rounded edges.
I haven't seen it, so I can speculate as to what I think, and you can use the poker face, Mark. I think a lot of it's going to boil down to how we believe the rebellion came about, because everything's always very black and white in Star Wars. It's not like that in real life in terms of when rebellions erupt. There's a darkness to the rebellion. There's death. There's violence, and they may consider that they're doing it for the right reasons, but it doesn't mean it's ethically right either. And I think that's where your perception is going to skew in terms of the original trilogy. In terms of Rogue One, we're going to understand a little bit more about the character of Andor, where there's a big chunk of the film where you kind of feel he's quite a cold character, and we're actually going to learn a little bit more about his youth and how he came to be. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. I wouldn't argue with that at all. The way they've described season 2 in being three episode blocks of 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. Season 1 feels like it's 3 episode blocks of, this is a couple of months and this is a few months and it's different things. So we got to see the first 4 episodes. So that first 3 is a chunk, and then you move into the next sort of little segment, if you like, to move into the next part of the story, which is a few for us is a while away yet. But yeah. I think you're right. From what I've seen, and without saying anything because I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, it very much feels like the run up to Rogue One feels organic at the moment. It feels like it's going to fit, and there's but that's all I've seen, and I'm not saying anything else because I'm going to say something I'll regret.
Good.
Yeah.
Gary is asking there if we're in agreement Andor's going to be a dark horse for Disney Plus. And surprise many. It kind of feels to me, and I'm going to say this, and maybe be controversial, I feel it's going to be more watchable and more, be happy to watch it on repeat a lot more. Where I kind of feel some of the other content's a little bit consumable. Kind of feel that there's a lot more invested in this that'll make us want to go back and watch it again, and it's going to have a lot more nuances perhaps than some of the other stuff has had.
That's fair. I certainly watched each episode more than once and enjoyed and got more out of it on following viewings. Definitely. Mr.
Naylor asks if Emphas Nest could appear. Well, she's going to be in Willow. So
good point. Yeah, no, I think she could. I mean, we've seen with the trailer, Saw Gerrera's in it, and the Partisans are in it. So there's possibility of bringing the Cloud Riders into it, because they're kind of hinting at that in Solo, that these pockets of rebellion, and I think you fold in Rebels characters, and there's opportunities. There's certainly opportunities. So I don't think that's a million miles off the mark either.
The other Andor news. Adria Arjona, I'm saying that completely wrong. I do apologise to her. I will learn it by the time the show comes round. She's been talking about her character, a risk taker. We don't know too much about the other characters going to be. Mon Mothma, Cassian Andor, we know lots about. Everybody else, we're kind of just getting little hints from interviews and trailers. But she seems to have quite a focus in the series, and she's going to really shape the narrative of the series, and really perhaps be the sort of linchpin that kind of highlights quite how bad the Imperials can be. That's kind of my assessment from what I've seen. Your thoughts?
Are you sure?
I'm not,
you've not seen it?
Yeah, I've not seen it at all. And I'll not ask you about the character because obviously you know too much. But in terms of what she spoke about in her interview, your thoughts on what she's going to bring to the series?
I think people are going to really dig the performance. She's a very I say impressive, maybe that's not the right word, but she's front and center, certainly in the first few episodes anyway, from what I've seen. And yeah, I think people are going to dig her. The one thing I really like about Andor, not just her character, but generally, is that it's very real world. It's very almost like blue collar working class sort of boots on the ground, people living real lives. Not everyone's flying around in spaceships. People have just got to get up at 6 a.m. and get to work. You see that in the trailer with the guy hitting the bells, the gongs. You know, it's like waking up the city in the morning.
He'd get sacked first.
Yeah, it's cosplay waiting for you there, mate.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, it's got that feel about it, and she's her character's within that sort of wheelhouse, and a risk taker. Yeah, I mean, she says it. I ain't going to argue with her. Yes, she's a risk taker. So it's well set. I think going slightly back to what you said a minute ago about what rewatchability. It's very it's the most adult Star Wars we've had, and Rogue One, you could argue, in the movies is kind of the most adult Star Wars we had. You know, with the scene on the Rings of Kafrene with Cassian shooting Tivik and stuff. It's that kind of gritty, you know. It's almost like the Raiders opening, isn't it? It's like the end of another adventure and you're going into the next one, sort of thing. It's within that, certainly within that wheelhouse. But she will be a favourite, and guaranteed you'll be seeing Bix Colleen cosplays at Celebration next year. Guaranteed.
Okay. Oh, we got moved too quick there. Let's go back. Right, I'm making a mess of this now.
Oh, this is terrible.
I've broke the system. Here we go. New figures coming from Andor.
Hey!
Eventually. They're going to be landing in Target on the 23rd of September and Walmart on the 6th of October. So let's take a little bit of a closer look. First up, we have the Black Series Shore Trooper. So pretty much character we've seen straight out of Rogue One. Kind of feels like. Yep. It's going to be a Target exclusive coming out in the fall. 23rd of September, in fact, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Nobody's going to break the bank to go rushing out to buy that one, I don't think.
No, I mean, it's certainly a figure that's got a fan following, Paul. Carl, by the way. I always think Carl as being a sort of a Scarif Troopers, lover. That armor, and there's slight tweaks. I think there's slight color differences there on the armor, but like you say, not a million miles away from what we saw in Rogue One.
Yep. Another figure very familiar with, Imperial Officer. This one's actually FedEx. Again, it's going to be Target exclusive on the 23rd. Again, probably disappointing people that it's going to be not too dissimilar a figure from what they've seen before.
Yeah.
So we'll skip something straight on to one that I think will make people happy, and that is Cassian Andor himself. And refers to it as the how do I say this again? Aldhani mission.
Yeah.
That'll do. I hate pronunciations of Star Wars names. It's coming to Walmart 6th of October at 10 a.m. It's also going to be part of the Walmart's Collector Con as well. That's probably the one that people are going to be most excited out of this range.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the pick of the bunch. You see him kind of seem sort of head and shoulders in this outfit in one of the trailers, sort of lined up in a row. Aldhani is it's in there for sure. But yeah, I think that's a cool looking figure. I like that. I like the look of that. And we've seen him in Imperial armor before, of course, in Rogue One. So I like the look of that. That might be one that ends up in my my collection, I think.
And the last one, I have to admit, I quite like as well. Purely because the accessories, the cloak, I think kind of works really nice on this. I'm a fan of cloaks. I like my cloaks. All Star Wars characters with cloaks are quality. That's all I can say. You can't name a single Star Wars character that wears a cloak that isn't a quality character. Imperial Officer Dark Times is going to be another Walmart 1 and Walmart Collector's Con out on the 6th of October. Price points in these are actually quite high, I think, at $28. Is that a reflection of the other times?
Yeah, dark times. Yeah, I think their packaging changes, the pound to the dollar. There's a number of factors that aren't helping anyone, collectors or Hasbro at the moment. Being at Collectomania today, episodes out on Making Tracks on Phantom Tracks Radio right now already. It was quite a common conversation, about the pricing points, and it's a natural conversation. So as long as they keep the quality of the products up, then they've got a shout at keeping a certain element of the fandom happy, but you're never going to keep everyone happy in movies, in toys.
Are these in the new packaging, or is this these still have the open plastic front to them, don't they?
I believe so, yeah. I believe these do, yeah.
I think people are going to be disappointed there's no Mon Mothma in there as a first wave to support Andor. Yeah,
I think it'll come. Definitely Mothma will come, and I can see, I think from the trailers we've seen, you can probably imagine there'll be, 2 or 3 outfits. I just hope it isn't a scenario like we had with Force Awakens when I think it was the Monopoly set and there wasn't a Rey in there, and people got really twitchy about the fact there wasn't a Rey.
Even though there was Rey and more product than anybody else.
Exactly.
Hashtag Where's Rey trended, and Rey was in more products than any other character.
Exactly, but they didn't want to give too much away, and I think if I remember, that was because she was carrying a lightsaber, and they didn't want to give away the lightsaber element. So I think that's what that was. But with this, I think certainly you think there'll be a Bix figure at some point. There'll be a Mothma figure. There's others. So Fiona Shaw's character. So there's other characters that will work their way in there.
Okay, let's move on from Rogue One to something that's going to be coming up on Disney Plus next year, and that's live action Ahsoka. Dave Filoni's been talking about it this past week. Pretty much the fact that he's living his dream, getting a chance to take a character that he's created all the way through animation through to live action and giving it their own series. And he points out, how rare an opportunity that is for someone that creates a character and animates a character. To also be able to dabble into live action with him. So he seems to be enjoying himself, and I'm always kind of a positive when someone's enjoying themselves making something. It often lends to a good end product. And is it a series
I think you're right.
You're looking forward to?
Oh yeah, blimey! And I think for many of the reasons you've just said, that infectious enjoyment comes across, which I think is a big tick in the box for Dave, because he kind of feels like one of us. Which of course he is. He's just one of us that gets to make this stuff as opposed to enjoying it like we do. But yeah, with Ahsoka, I think he would have been there right early doors when George comes up with all the ideas, and of course Dave's inherited a lot of that stuff and pushed it forward and moved it on, and clearly Ahsoka as a character is very important and special to him. So there's a nice side of that. Yes, good point, Paul. The Rebels touch, and that Dave's now got the opportunity to bring characters from animation into live action. It's happened before. Saw Gerrera is the big example, but to be able to do that with a character like Ahsoka, who's been so key to Clone Wars and to Rebels, and then back in the Clone Wars season 7, and then turns up like Gandalf in Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. She's one of those characters that will be that kind of. That kind of character.
Are you just spoiling the Rings of Power there?
Maybe.
Who is the mystery man that's fallen from the sky?
The Rocket Man. It's Elton John. Come on, you know who it is. But I think for him to be able to take that character now and do more with it in live action, and to have directed. You mentioned the Clone Wars movie. Dave directed that. To have directed animation with these great characters, and to be given the opportunity to do all that he did with those characters and be given the scope that he was given, and now with technology and just everything else and affordability and Disney Plus and all the other elements that make these things possible, stagecraft, to be able to do that and continue those stories in live action. 10 years ago we would have thought, I'm going to be in animation forever if I want to get these stories told, and now he's on set directing people. That's living the dream. So I totally get why you're so excited.
Proper TV.
Yeah. Proper TV. Yeah. Says when Ren and Stimpy's coming back next week, which is the greatest thing ever. So yeah.
Live action Ren and Stimpy, that would be good.
That'd be scary.
Yeah, it would be. Let's go back in time a little bit. Han Solo, original trilogy, and New Hope. Blaster's been up for sale and made over £1 million, a new record. Let's be honest, there's a little bit of controversy around this blaster. People are claiming that only some elements of it are actually original parts and other parts are not. People debating whether it's been screen used, etc. But someone was willing to cough up £1 million and was comfortable with the provenance, provided that it's authentic. And that's a lot of money, especially in these difficult financial times. There we go, Mr. Newbold.
Everything is screen used, but don't tell Ruth that I spent $1 million on this. Don't tell Ruth. No, it is a lot of money, and I think the previous record was something like 400,000 for a Captain Kirk blaster.
615,000 for Captain James T. Kirk.
There you go.
Laser rifle. I didn't even know they had laser rifles in Star Trek.
Very early on, I think in Where No Man Had Gone Before, he uses it to shoot the rocks down that puts Gary Mitchell in the grave, if I remember, something crazy like that. But yeah, I think there's 3 of these blasters in like the top 10. There's a Jedi blaster and there's other stuff. It's insane money, and whoever bought this will at some point in time probably move it on for twice this money until somebody finds one in their loft. And these things happened. I do know of a very interesting story. I won't name names, but somebody has in their possession 2 original series blasters that have been screen matched, that literally somebody was given back in the 60s and put in a couple of sort of biscuit tins and left in their loft. So these things do turn up, but this was a steal, I've got to say. And just don't tell them that I've taken.
I'm questioning some of those parts are authentic, Mark.
No, they're all authentic, I promise you.
Okay.
Dib.
Something that's maybe more in our price range from Regal Robot.
Yes.
Their archive collection, Tusken Raider prop replica bust. Limited to just 150 pieces. Looks absolutely incredible, as everything that Mr. Spina produces does. Up for purchase now. This kind of thing that I'd love to have in my collection. Yeah,
absolutely. It's just beautiful work. I should have called this article Tatooine or Bust, shouldn't I? You imagine getting up close to that, the detail that Tom, we've both been fortunate enough to have been to his workshop, and just to see the stuff that's there and the detail that's available that they do, the depth they go to, and the work that they put in, that you could really go nose to nose with that thing and it would just still feel completely like it's going to start, barking at you like a donkey. The work they put in, the stuff that they do is
there's a real,
genuinely next level.
Yeah, there's a real labour of love goes into these things, and everything's handmade.
And just the detail, the screen matching, the colour. Imagine getting exactly the right colour for those. And that's the thing. And just everything. There's
so much love goes into these things that they go to next level in terms of screen matching the stuff and getting it 100% right. Far beyond even me as an obsessive fan could tell that that's how it should look. They're next level in terms of what they're doing here to make this as perfect as it can possibly be.
Absolutely. And one of the nice things as well is that Tom is genuinely one of the nicest guys in and around the fandom, which makes you kind of root for these things to do well, that he gets the opportunity to do more. And let's say Regal Robot's been around for a good few years now. They've established themselves as, an absolute leader in the field.
Yeah. And you can also get that on a 12-month payment plan as well. So making it all the more affordable. I don't think they'll have a payment plan on the hand blaster. They are 100 grand a month probably not helping many people.
It's fine.
You need that for your electricity bill.
God, don't say that.
Yeah. New Prime Minister this week. Do we want to talk that? What are they going to do?
What are they going to do? I think the last one out the door turns the lights off. I think that's the answer to everything. 80
billion is what I reckon it'll cost to do anything to help people and businesses. So you get no hope of finding that money without there being taxes.
They just need
taxes.
to sell their blasters. Just sell their blasters.
Sell their blasters. That's what you're going to have to do.
Easy.
Yeah. We're not going to solve the world, though, but we have managed to cover everything Star Wars news related from this past week, Mark. I appreciate you joining me on the show again. Always fun to have you on.
Yes.
What's coming up this week on Fantha Tracks?
Oh, yeah, so it's been a busy week. So last week we had episode 148 of Making Tracks. On Friday it was Wave 2, as we call it, Wave 2 of Collecting Tracks, the Tarkin Initiative, where the guys look into Tarkin, Grand Moff Tarkin collectibles, which was really interesting. Today, as we speak, was Collectomania 27 special episode. We spoke to Dave Barkley, who was a Jabba and Yoda puppeteer. And on, where are we now? Tuesday, fingers crossed, if me and Mark can get our act together, we will have the next episode of Making Tracks. And yeah, we've got one of those coming up fairly soon. Me and Paul have already planned it, so there's one of those coming up in a few weeks, and that's coming out on Tuesday. And what we've got next, we've got Desert Planet Discs out on the 23rd, I think, of the month. I know Carl and Greg are working on that, and there's definitely a Fantha Down Under coming out on the 16th, because as far as I know, I'm on it, so I apologise in advance. And yeah, so lots of good stuff coming.
Gary there's heading off to Batu, so he's got plenty to listen to on the plane if he gets downloading now.
Oh, good man. Yes. Have fun, Gary.
Yeah. On that note, we'll call that the end of the show. Thank you everyone for joining us. Appreciate all your comments. And we'll be back next week with more Star Wars news, and we'll find out what's happened in the week. See you soon, Mark.
Au revoir.